Hello, and welcome to Look Up Tonight. This is the cable show of the Orange County Astronomers. The OCA is one of the largest, if not the largest, local astronomy club in the USA, with nearly 900 members. And this show is one of our ways we try to spread the astronomy bug, hopefully, to you. Tonight's show features OCA member Wally Pacholka, who shares with us the techniques he uses to produce some of the most stunning astrophotographs you will ever see. Here is Wally Pacholka.
Thank you very much for having me here. Actually, I'm very humbled to be here. I'm very honored to be here. I wouldn't say I'm a real accomplished astrophotographer. I know there's just so many people here within the club here and the subgroup, the Astro Imagers, that are much more accomplished camera technicians than I am. I've been taking pictures for some 30 years, but frankly, I haven't advanced too far. I started 30 years ago with this camera set up, and this is still what I shoot with today, almost exclusively. Over 98% of the images that I take, and all of the images that you'll see here tonight, were taken with a camera set up like this. Basic 35 millimeter camera, standard 50 millimeter lens. And that's what I like to shoot with, mainly because the standard lens gives you what the human eye sees. And I like to, I love the night sky. I've loved it ever since I was a kid. And I like to be able to take home with me and show family and friends the night sky as it really is. And the best way to capture that is just with a standard 50 millimeter lens. So let's go on here. As I mentioned here, this is a picture of an area very similar to where I grew up outside of Montreal, Canada. It's a lake out in the forest. I've been a star lover ever since I was a kid. I got into photography to answer my parents and friends' constant question: so what do you do out there in the mountains or desert anyway? And or what do you see out there? So ever since then, I basically forced my basic astrophotography to answer that basic question. Now when people ask, I can say, well, this is what I saw last night. And as this photograph shows here, you can see the Gemini twins, Castor and Pollux, rising over the mountain ridge, and you can also see them reflected in the lake. Or I could say, come home and say, well, hey, this is what I saw last night. I saw Orion rising over the ridge. It's a little bit cloudy last night, but that's okay. The clouds kind of added to the view. Or I can come home and say, well, I went and saw the Perseid meteor shower at Joshua Tree National Park. And this is just one of many meteors I saw. Or famous comet Hale-Bopp, which was visible to the naked eye for more than 12 months. Visible for every country in the world. Over 80% of the world saw this comet. This is an image from Joshua Tree National Park. Or I can come home and say, well, hey, I saw the moon rise last night in Nevada, or the Milky Way in Sequoia National Park, or the Milky Way in Nevada desert. Or Mars, as we all know, it made its closest approach to Earth in 50,000 years. Here's a view of Mars through Arch Rock a couple of months before its closest approach. A month later as it got closer. And here on the night of closest approach. I probably took about 3,000 images of Mars. I've traveled to over 12 national parks. My intent was basically to shoot Mars from a place that looked like Mars. And this is one of the places I found. It's a fantastic park. It's called Valley of Fire State Park. It's about 60 miles northeast of Las Vegas. And we'll see more images from this park. Okay, my goal tonight is to point out a few techniques that will help anyone with a basic camera to take great shots of events in the night sky. And that's what I like to do. I like to shoot events. I like to shoot meteor showers. I like to shoot comets. I like to shoot Mars or the moon. So come with me and let me show you the beauty of the night sky and how you can capture it with surprisingly simple equipment and technique. My basic equipment, as I just pointed out to you, is a standard 35 millimeter camera. The make really doesn't matter. The important thing with the camera is to use it on a manual mode. And actually, the older cameras are better. They don't have all the sophistication. The sophistication all actually gets in the way for simple astrophotography. I use a standard 50mm lens, and again, the reason for that is I want to capture images that look like what I saw the previous night. Okay? I don't want to zoom in. I just want to get the natural view. Of course, you need a tripod, a cable release. That's the little thing here that locks down the exposure because you need to take a time exposure. And I'll get into that in a minute. I use Fuji 800 film. You could use many films, but this is a fast, fine-grained film, and I use it. It's available at Target, 4 rolls for $10, so it's very, very inexpensive. And I also use a flashlight. And the reason I use a flashlight, as you can see in this photograph here, I would be in the dark there, but someone is lighting me up with a flashlight or with a flash fill. And since I like to capture the scenery in images, not just the celestial object or the celestial event, I like to capture the surrounding scenery. Because when you walk out there in the desert, you not only see the constellations up in the sky, but you can actually see the desert. The human eye is amazingly versatile. So I like my images to pick up both of those items, the night sky as well as the scenery. Camera settings, again, are very simple and almost self-explanatory. You focus at infinity, the stars are really far. Okay, so that's an easy one. Okay, there's only 3 things you need to adjust. Okay, focus on infinity, the lens wide open. Of course, you want as many stars as possible, so you want to let in as much light as possible. So you set the camera lens wide open. That's usually around f2. It might be f 1.4. And exposure at 30 seconds. Some cameras have a 30-second timer. Most don't. Those that don't usually have what's called a bulb setting, and that's I set it on bulb, and that just means time exposure setting. And the camera will stay open as long as you push the button, but you really don't want to push the button. You want to have a cable release that holds down the shutter for 30 seconds. Now the key, why 30 seconds? A lot of people ask me that. Well, if you go longer than 30 seconds, you're going to get star streaks, okay? And it's simply because of the Earth's rotation. As we all know, it's if you were to drive a car and head in one direction and travel around the world, it'd be 25,000 miles. So you divide that by 24 hours, that's 1,000 miles an hour. So the Earth is actually spinning very, very fast. So your exposure has to be less than 30 seconds if you want the stars as points. And of course, since you want your picture to be realistic, you want the stars to be points and not streaks. Okay, and then again, use the flashlight on the foreground to light up the foreground. Because this shot here, the comet, would be an interesting image of the comet, but it's much more interesting and dramatic if you have the foreground in there also. Okay, so basic planning. My camera technique is basically the same for most of the objects that I shoot, whether it's a constellation, meteor, comet, the moon, or planet. But you need to do different planning if you want to shoot different objects, and I'll get into that. And pick a location with good foreground scenery. That's probably the number one point. It's kind of like the real estate 3 rules of real estate: location, location, location. If you're shooting from a good location, you're going to get good results. This image, by the way, is just 10, 15 miles from here. It's Corona del Mar. Little Corona del Mar, sometimes people call it. If you go Pacific Coast Highway and see the Crowned Restaurant, and just turn on that street, and you'll run into the ocean, and you can walk down and get this site. It's a great, one of my favorite local places. Okay, my basic style, as I kind of already hinted, was capture the whole scene, include the celestial event, whatever it is, a meteor, comet, or a constellation, but also include the local foreground scenery. Okay, we're going to get into the how-to here, how to shoot different objects. Okay, how to shoot constellations. Of course, constellations are out every night. And so it's a fairly easy target. And the title of my talk here is how to shoot astrophotos that get published. But even if you're not interested in getting published, of course, who would not want to get something published? But even if you're not interested in that, wouldn't it be nice to be able to go out and take some photos of some of your favorite constellations and hang them on your wall at home or hang them on your wall in your office? And that's what we're going to show you how to do tonight. Okay, if you want to shoot a constellation like Orion, okay, pick a location with interesting foreground scenery where the constellation is near the horizon. Okay, because in other words, you want to include the constellation. You want to include scenery along with the constellation. So you have to do a little planning. You have to know when Orion's going to be rising. Okay, and you could do that by becoming familiar with the sky yourself, or you could use a program like Starry Nights that will basically replicates the sky as it actually will appear each night, and you put in the time or what direction you're facing, and it'll tell you. But if you just go out and look at the sky from night after night, you get familiar pretty much with when things are rising. Okay, and now in your photograph, a little trick I use, I try to get 2/3 sky and about 1/3 of Earth in the frame, or 1/3 scenery. It just kind of has a better composition that way. Okay, this is an image without scenery, and I'm just doing this just to show you how it looks. This picture, obviously, of the Big Dipper and a meteor going through it. And of course, many people would say, "Whoa, boy, I'd love to get a picture of the Big Dipper with a meteor." And it's nice to have, but it's not anywhere near as nice than if you included some type of scenery in the shot. Okay, now let me just go over how I took this shot. Okay, I basically camera on a tripod. Of course, I picked out beforehand the location. I like red rock, and half my images here, or more than half, you can see a lot of red rock. I think it just shows up good in the photograph. So I often go to places like Joshua Tree or Red Rock Canyon or the Valley of Fire to find the red rock and include those in my images. So I basically figured out what time when the Big Dipper would be over the horizon, because the Big Dipper spins around the sky. It's at the 6 o'clock position here. 6 hours later it'll be at the 3 o'clock position, and 12 hours later it'll be basically almost overhead. In 24 hours it'll be back exactly where it is again. So again, you have to kind of figure out where the constellation is going to be and when it's going to be over the rock formation. Okay, so once you figure that out, you go out there at that time, you point the camera to the Big Dipper, you include the foreground scenery, you hit the cable release, the camera is now taking an image. 30 seconds on Fujifilm, lens wide open, you'll pick up every star you can see with the naked eye. Okay, now during that time, you hit the cable release, you're not doing anything. So what I do at that point, basically I take out a flashlight, and this flashlight I use is very small, and I just light up the rock, just like that. I just basically paint the rock. And it depends on how far the rock is as to how long I paint the rock. And usually I try to get rocks that are at least that far away, because if they're any closer, they'll be out of focus. And if the rocks are really far, I might have a flashlight in each pocket, and I might use two flashlights. Okay, you don't always need a flashlight. Sometimes just a silhouette works out very well. Again, you're still getting the scenery here. You get your gist that you're in the forest, and this is how the Big Dipper looked last night from Hume Lake in Sequoia National Park. By the way, sometimes I use a star filter. This little filter you still screw on the front of the camera, and it'll basically put a little star or twinkling effect on the brightest stars, and it'll make the constellation stand out a little bit from the other stars. So that's just a little trick. This is the Big Dipper over a very unusual rock formation. It's called Elephant Rock, of course. It looks like an elephant. It's an amazing formation in that if you walk over on the other side of it, it still looks like an elephant on the other side. It's quite an amazing feature. Okay, here's a constellation Orion through Window Arch in Arches National Park. Again, I had to time things right to get Orion just as it was rising through this window. Actually, I got there a little late. Orion's not quite dead centered, but it's still worked out. Again, just to review how I took this photograph, got Orion, went there at the time when Orion was visible through the arch, focused at infinity, pointed the camera at Orion, and was tried to get back far enough so that the rocks were not out of focus. Hit the cable release for 30 seconds. During that exposure time, took out my flashlight and flashed the rocks, basically painting it to be able to include those in the scenery. A little bit later, the previous shot was I took a picture through the window, the arch on the bottom, and then I waited some time and got a picture of Orion as it rose above the arch. Actually, I should have waited probably another 5 minutes. I missed one of the stars in the constellation. I was able to see it up here, but my camera was down here, so I missed the bottom star. But again, the same approach, waiting for the constellation to be above the rock, taking a 30-second exposure. During that 30-second exposure, using a flashlight. In this case, the rocks were pretty far away, so I probably used 2 flashlights to paint the rock. This here is a unusual formation in Arches National Park. It's called Double Arch. It's basically a cave. I'm looking straight overhead here. The camera's pointing straight up. It's very unusual. I'm sure eons ago people actually lived in that cave and they had a window with a view, I guess you might say. Okay, shooting meteors. Okay, the camera technique is basically the same, but you need to plan differently, obviously. You can't go out any night like you can shooting constellations. Okay, so anyhow, you choose a night when there's a meteor shower because your chances are greater. And as I say in the bottom, just repeat. I mean, it's just, you have to take a lot of shots. But even this shot here without a meteor is still a great shot, okay? It's still nice to be able to put up on your wall at home or up in the office. This is my very first meteor shot. It was 1997. And I think it was Konica film. It was a very, very fast film, 3200. But it's a very, very grainy. Here's another shot. I got this the same time period. This Perseid meteor. It's just a tiny, tiny meteor. But this was published, mainly not because the meteor is so good, but just because the scenery. Even nowadays, the scenery is not the greatest. But it just shows you that just having some scenery there does add. This is a shot from a couple years ago. It's one of my favorites. Perseid meteor over Joshua Tree National Park. The rock formation on the right. I have that rock formation in many of my photos. I end up going to the same place all the time because there's good. The scenery is good there. So a lot of my photos, you'll see the same rock formations. Like the rock formation on the right looks like a hand, and you'll see that in a number of my photos. Okay. This is a Great Leonid meteor storm in 2001. That's obviously the Pleiades. I really like this shot. That's traveling through about 70 miles of atmosphere there. Again, all of these, I shot hundreds and hundreds of images, no meteors. Okay, sometimes if you point your camera north, you could take exposures longer than 30 seconds. In other words, even though the stars streak here, they have a pattern to them. I'm looking north with the North Star that's kind of in the center there. And so you can get some interesting shots by pointing north, and you can take much longer exposures. You don't have to shoot as much film that way. Okay, again, this is another shot shooting north. And there's actually 4 meteors in here. I don't know if you can see them, but this is 2 Lyrid meteors and 2 sporadic. Here's one here, sporadic. Now, here, you can tell the Lyrids, this one and this one are parallel. So you could tell if they're coming from that shower. But there's one here and another one, very faint one here. But in any case, this was in 5 minutes. I got 4 meters. This is very, very rare. Okay, shooting comets. Again, the camera technique is pretty much the same, but obviously you have to go out when there's a comet and a bright comet. And same thing, you pick a location with interesting foreground scenery and shoot a 30-second exposure and light up the foreground. It's, the technique's the same. And But once you know that technique, you can take pictures of almost anything you can see with the naked eye. And this again is Comet Hale-Bopp, a fabulous comet, very, very brilliant, even in the city. But from the dark location, it was just something to behold. And here it is close to the night of closest approach, and it was still 120 million miles away. If it was as close as Comet Hyakutake that came the year previously, it would have filled the sky and been, I don't know, 10 times brighter than the full moon. It would have been just an incredible comet. Or it was an incredible comet, but it would have been an incredible sight if it was as close as that other comet. This again is Hale-Bopp. You can't miss it, really. Just two beautiful tails. And again, this is just 35 millimeter camera on a tripod. Okay, now this is going back in time 1 year. This is Comet Hyakutake, a Japanese comet, or discoverer. And, okay, sorry. Yeah. Okay, this is, for me, this is a turning point picture, okay? Prior to this, I never used the lighting technique, but I was taking this picture of Comet Hyakutake, and next to me was a whole bunch of Cub Scouts or Boy Scouts, and they had this big bonfire going, and it lit up the rocks. And I kind of thought it was a big nuisance while I was out there. And anyhow, when I got it developed, I said, wow, this kind of looks neat. Not only am I seeing the comet, but I could see some of the surroundings. And I like that. Okay, shooting the moon. We're back to the Corona del Mar shot. The moon can be an easy object almost any night of the month because usually the moon's out. And even with a 50 millimeter lens, you can get some interesting shots. Okay, again, select an interesting foreground and just exposure and f-stop to the face of the moon. Obviously, you don't want to take a 30-second exposure. It just, you'll have to experiment that yourself, like a 1 second. And rather than wide open, you need to cut down the f-stop, f8 or something like that. Okay, this is the moon in Poodle Rock in the Valley of Fire. And here I am again down at Corona del Mar. This was the biggest full moon in 120 years, something like that. And so I thought that was an event. So I ran down there, and this is in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. The moon's actually setting. And I had to get wet on this one because I wanted the moon in a certain position. So I actually got wet up to my waist because the waves were coming in. But anyhow, sometimes that's what you have to do. Okay, here's a full moon rising. And, if you just look around for interesting locations, again, that's more than half the battle, so to speak. This is the full moon rising on September 10th, along with Mars there on the right-hand side. This was a fairly difficult photograph because the moon's very bright, obviously. And if I cut down the exposure so that the moon will be exposed correctly, just get a nice circular image of the moon, then I wouldn't see Mars, because I would have to cut down too much. So I wanted to get Mars in the image. Okay, so I had to basically overexpose on the moon, but it actually ended up being nice. The moon looks brilliant, looks like the sun, and so it worked out pretty good. I also had to have the lighting had to be pretty strong. I think I used a couple of flashlights, and I used my camera flash because I had to light up the rock. Otherwise, the rock would be all dark. So I had to play around with that one quite a bit. Review, basically people remember things in context, like the sun rising over the desert, or a full moon setting over the ocean, or a comet over a Joshua tree, or a falling star over a mountain ridge. Photographic style, as you can clearly see, my photographic style is to always include scenery. When you include scenery, you get the down-to-earth, man-in-the-desert view of the night sky that people can relate to, and they can see themselves there. Publishers often want just that. They want images of what the average person would see if they went out tonight and saw the meteor shower. Okay, getting your images before publishers. Again, you always need a plan, the celestial event that you want to shoot in advance, and then plan the location. Do whatever it takes to get the outstanding shot. Might mean long drives or long hours. And then once you get some good images, do something with it. Don't just put it in a drawer, but post them on the OCA website, or Astronomy Picture of the Day website is a great website. A lot of photo researchers, people that are looking for images for magazines or whatever, often go to the Astronomy Picture of the Day site. And so if you submit images, and they'll accept some. Also, having images available to publishers before the day of the celestial event, if that's possible. Like, for instance, if there's going to be a meteor shower, Perseid meteor shower next week, it'd be good if you had a image on hand of the Perseid meteor shower from last year that you can give them, and so they could use it for so the public could see what a meteor shower looks like. Okay, so thanks for spending a night under the stars with me.
Thank you, Wally. Those are just truly inspirational photographs of a rare kind. It makes me want to get out there myself and try my hand at doing something similar. Just shows what you can do when you really put your mind to it. And remember, you can attend the next OCA meeting for yourself. The meetings are always free and open to the public. They're usually held on the second Friday of every month at 7:30 p.m. at Chapman University in Orange. Please do check our website for further details. Well, now that's the end of this show, but thank you very much for joining us tonight. I'm Liam Kennedy with the Orange County Astronomers. Now, get out there and look up tonight.